Hey guys, it's Kira and today it's time for another Bake Off Vegan Bake Along, and this week I am more than a little bit nervous because this week on Bake Off was Dairy Week, which, as the title might suggest, is literally my nightmare as a vegan because there is a whole week dedicated to a whole food group that I choose not to eat, and so I'm really nervous about taking on the technical challenge and trying to make it vegan because there's just so many elements that could go horrifically wrong. So if you didn't watch Bake Off this week, the technical challenge was a Tudor recipe called Maids of Honour, which basically was a puff pastry tart filled with lemon curd and a cheese curd filling, which sounds horrific, but I'm going to be attempting to veganize it. So I have gone down the route of trying to basically make a vegan cheesecake filling along with a vegan puff pastry and a vegan lemon curd. So there are so many things that could go wrong because the puff pastry sounds really complicated. Lemon curd has butter and eggs, which means there's a lot for me to replace and a lot that could go wrong. And of course the cheese curds completely can't be veganized, so I've just had to go for an alternative similar product. So I'm doing like a cashew based cheesecake filling, so hopefully that will go well, but there are so many things to think about, so much that could go wrong, and I'm just really nervous about it. But either way, it's going to be really fun to see whether I can do it, and if not, you know, I won't be too mad because for all the weeks not to do well on, Dairy Week is one where I can really forgive myself because it is pretty tricky to veganize that many different products that are very focused on them being dairy. So without further ado, I'm going to head down to the kitchen and get started and see how this very technical, very dairy-based bake goes. Okay, so I'm just about to get started on the rough puff pastry, and literally even saying that out loud makes me nervous because pastry I know is very hard, and I've only ever really done like short crust pastry, and that is both as a vegan and as a non-vegan. I've never tried any kind of puff pastry, vegan or otherwise. I've eaten it obviously, but I've never actually made it, so it just seems very complicated and I'm a little bit nervous just because I know that it's probably going to be harder in the vegan version because the butter that we use as vegans is like a margarine style rather than like butter, and so I just think it's going to be a little bit tricky, but I'm hoping it will go well. Like I said, I've eaten vegan puff pastry, so I know it can be done, but can I do it? We'll have to just find out. But yes, I'm going to get started with that now. So this first bit is the relatively easy part, and that is just mixing up the pastry dough. So obviously using my sieve to pop the flour all into the bowl. So messy, man. I'm not a fan of this sieve so far. Along with a little bit of salt, and then the first bit of vegan butter. Now, as always, I'll just need to combine these into like a breadcrumb-like mixture before adding any water. This bit I can do without a doubt. It's the next bits that are a bit scary. Okay, so I'm going to roll my sleeves up for this next bit because once again I've put on a long sleeve top for what is probably going to be a kind of messy bake. And now I just need to add water, cold water, a tablespoon at a time until it combines into a stiff dough. You'll just need to eyeball it because I feel like dough is very temperamental. Like it could say that you need 8 and you could do 8 and it could be super dry, or you could go ahead and add 8 straight away and it would be super wet. So I always just kind of like play it by ear and see what the dough wants to do on that particular day. Gross. Seems like quite a small amount of pastry, but that's what it did say on the website. I guess it's only small tarts that we're making. So
how many did it make?
12 apparently. Obviously you've got to add a lot of butter still, so. Okay, so yeah, that's all of the water that we need added. I ended up probably doing about 15 tablespoons, so definitely more than the like 5 to 8 that the website suggested. So yeah, just play it by ear, but you'll want just like a rough ball of dough. So I'm just going to combine that a little bit more with my hands and pick up all of the loose pieces, and then turn it out onto the surface and put a little bit of flour down and just knead it and then roll it out. So, next up, I'm just going to go and find my trusty rolling pin and roll this out into a long triangle. Triangle? Rectangle. Oh my god, what an idiot. Triangle. Wow. Okay, so I've got my trusty rolling pin, and I'm just going to roll this out now into a rectangle, not a triangle. Okay, so this is the part where it starts to get a little bit more complicated, because now I have to start making all of the like thin layers that make up the rough puff pastry. And so what you need to do is, in this like why can I not think of the word rectangle? Rectangle, not triangle. In the bottom third, I need to put some vegan frozen butter. Then I need to roll it up, roll it back out into another rectangle shape, and then do the same thing again, which should then sort of the butter layered into the pastry then helps to make all of the like flaky layers. Now, it sounds relatively simple, but I know that it could be somewhat complicated because vegan butter is soft at the best of times. So I've had my butter in the freezer overnight to try and make it as cold as possible, but it's still kind of soft. It's like soft but cold. So I'm hoping that that will do the trick, but we'll just have to wait and see, because yeah, I think at this point, if you've ever, as like a non-vegan, had Lurpak butter in the block, that is so hard, and this butter that's been in the freezer all night still isn't as hard as that is when it's just been in the fridge. So I'm hoping that it goes okay, but we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and wait and see. Okay, so I'm just popping a little bit more flour down on it before rolling it. Oh, what am I even talking about? I don't need to roll it yet. Okay, so next up, I just need to pop it onto this plate. It does say that you're meant to put it in cling film and pop it in the fridge, but one, we don't have cling film, and two, I find that cling film is a massive wasteful thing. Like, why would you want to wrap something in plastic just to put it in the fridge and then end up throwing it away afterwards? Like, that's not very sustainable. So I'm just going to put it on this plate, and I think that that should do the trick as well. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not like you need to hold it in place. So I'm just going to pop this in the fridge for 20 minutes and then roll it out again. All right, so the first 20 minutes has passed and my vegan rough puff pastry has done the first 20 minutes in the fridge. So I'm just going to pop this out onto the surface, throw a little bit of flour on and roll it out again, then fold it up. Alright, so now that the pastry is in for its second 20-minute chill session, I'm going to be making the like cheesecake version that I'm going to be using, because obviously on Bake Off it's made up of curd cheese, which sounds actually horrific, but cheese is made up of curds and whey, and so obviously in dairy-free milks and everything there is no way you see what I did there, that you can do that. So I've had to come up with the best alternative I could think of, and from what it looked like on Bake Off, the top section that was made up of the curd cheese seemed to be made up of like, it looked like a baked cheesecake consistency, and so I've managed to come up with a recipe for a cashew based vegan baked cheesecake. So that is what I'm going to make now. So I'm just going to basically do it all in the blender. It's actually really easy to make. You just have to shove all the ingredients in the blender, and then of course once everything else is ready I can bake it. So I'm just going to do that now. So first up I've got some almond milk. Now I've never actually made this recipe before, so I didn't want to go with too much almond milk to begin with because I want it to be quite a thick cheesecake. So I've gone with 200 mils to begin with, but of course if I need to add more later I can. And then some corn flour as well, just a tablespoon. Then we've got our cashews, the most important ingredient, which I soaked in the fridge overnight in like a mug of water, just because that makes it a whole lot easier to blend. Then we've got some cream cheese. I just went for this Tesco's own one, but literally any vegan cream cheese will do the job. This one is coconut based, but that doesn't really matter, I don't think. Gosh, there's a lot of ingredients in this food processor. Okay, then we've got some zested lemons, which smell incredible. Hopefully that will make this taste lovely. 100 grams of caster sugar, and finally just a tablespoon of maple syrup. Okay, so I hope that my blender can blend this all up, but we'll see. Jesus Christ.
Oh my god, it's
coming in the right place. Okay, right. Okay, so that is all blended and very smooth, so that's a good sign. I'm just going to taste it and see what it's like. That's super creamy and very lemony, which is what I was going for, so that's a win for me. It is quite runny, so what I'm probably going to do is add a little bit more corn flour and lightly heat it over the pan, which I'll show you in a minute, just to allow it to thicken up slightly, because when the case, like the pastry cases actually go in the oven, they don't have to bake for all that long, so I want to give it a chance to thicken up slightly beforehand. But for now I actually need to get the pastry out of the fridge again and roll that one more time, so I'm just going to pop this to one side and I'll heat it in the next 20-minute segment that I've got free. Okay, so I've got my pastry out of the fridge yet again, and I just need to roll it out one more time. I've got my trusty wine bottle, and I'm just gonna pop some flour onto the surface and roll this out one more time. Cool, so that's all folded and ready to go in the fridge for its final chill session. Okay, so the pastry has come out of the fridge for its final chill, and I'm now just going to roll it out into a longer and wider rectangle, then cut 12 little pastry cases out of it and pop them in the oven to blind bake. Okay, so now before I blind bake them, you're meant to put some baking paper into each case and line them with baking beans. Now, I don't have baking beans, so what I'm going to be doing is just lining each one with some baking paper and then shoving in a few pieces of pasta, just because all it's meant to do is weigh it down, so I feel like that should do the job just as well. Okay, so those are all ready now, and I'm just going to pop them in the oven to blind bake for 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so while the pastry cases are blind baking, my next step is to make the lemon curd, which again, I'm slightly nervous about because I know that lemon curd is very dairy and egg based, so we'll just have to see how it goes. I'm just going to get all the ingredients and pop them in a pan to heat up and hopefully turn into a delicious lemon curd. So the first step is to add the lemon and juice and zest, along with some dairy-free butter and some caster sugar to the pan, and allow them to basically just cook down and melt. So I'm just going to put them on a low heat and hopefully the butter will melt nicely. And then after that I just need to add some corn flour yet again, and hopefully that will allow it to thicken into a nice curd. A lot of curds in this recipe. Obviously I've avoided the curd cheese, but I'm not sure if this could officially be called a lemon curd on account of the fact that it doesn't have any dairy in, but maybe I'll call it like a lemon sauce basically is what we're going for. So unlike with the cashew sauce where I didn't add enough corn flour straight away, I'm just going to go straight in with 2 tablespoons. I'm going to turn down the heat so it doesn't burn the butter, and then just stir this and obviously remove any of the lumps left by the corn flour. Yeah, probably just needs a smidge more corn flour. I'll go for a 3rd tablespoon. So next up what I'm going to do is move this over to this back heat, and on the front one I'm going to start thickening up my cashew mixture. So this one I obviously need a slightly larger pan because there's quite a lot of this mixture, probably more than I need, to be honest. And once again, I'm just going to add a couple of tablespoons of corn flour. Okay, I might even take the lemon off the heat because that seems to have gone to the perfect level of thickness. What a success! Yay! Now let's just hope for a similar level of success with this. At the moment, the cashew one kind of looks like runny porridge, so we'll have to see how this ends up. And then the final step for the lemon one is just to add a couple of splashes of almond milk to make it slightly creamier now that it's off the heat. Yep, and just one more splash. Because corn flour does keep thickening even after you've taken it off the heat. Kind of like eggs do, I believe. They keep cooking while they're warm, even if they're not directly heated, so that's why I've taken that one off of the heat. I think this one might need a bit more corn flour. So basically this is a very, very corn flour heavy recipe. That is all of my corn flour, so hopefully those 5 tablespoons will have helped. I'm going to taste the lemon one, see what we're dealing with. Oh, that's actually really yummy. It's actually just like lemon curd. Wow. Well, if one thing has gone well, at least I can say that I now know how to make vegan lemon curd, because I did not know how to make that before, and now I do. Yay. Lovely. It does look like porridge though, but on a positive note, I love porridge, so you know, this is not bad for me. I think it's just potentially, I don't have a particularly fancy food processor. Mine is just like a basic one that I got from the supermarket, and it does the trick, but it doesn't necessarily get rid of all of the cashew lumps that you might find if you use like a really high-powered food processor or blender like a Vitamix. So obviously, it just depends what equipment you're working with, but at the end of the day, it does the trick well enough. Okay, so that is thick and lovely, and I actually honestly feel like it looks like breakfast. So. Right, and it's almost time to get the pastry cases out of the oven, so hopefully we can get this all assembled and in the oven in no time. Okay, so now that the pastry cases are out, the next step is to assemble them and rebake them with the fillings in. Now my only concern is that they are definitely very shallow, and probably that was my mistake for not using a proper pastry cutter because I didn't know how big they were going to be, and I did end up with quite a bit of excess pastry, so I could have made them bigger, but it is what it is. But hopefully they will still be nice even if a little bit shallow. So I'm just going to take a teaspoon at a time of the lemon curd filling to begin with and pop that at the base of each case. Then on top of the lemon curd, I then have to put some of the cheesecake filling, which there is a ridiculous amount of. Oops. I think in the real recipe, there's meant to be like at least double the amount of the cheesecake filling to the lemon curd filling, which isn't happening in this instance because they're so shallow, but hopefully it will still be good. And to be honest, I feel like the lemon bit is the nicer part, so I'm not mad about the fact that there are going to be a more equal amount of each ingredient. Okay, so those are all filled now, so I'm ready to pop them in the oven and hope for the best. Now for the second bake, they only need to be in the oven for a total of about 15 minutes, and so hopefully they won't burn. I'm hoping not, but we'll see. My oven does like to make a fool of me and burn things very quickly, so we'll see how it all goes. Okay, so everything is out of the oven and it looks good aside from what I've already mentioned about the fact that they are a little bit shallow. But aside from that, everything is looking good and I'm pretty pleased with how they've turned out. So I'm just going to pop them over here, turn them out into a plate so that they can cool down a little, and then of course move on to the most important part, which is the taste test. Yay! They actually pop out okay. They haven't stuck. Okay, so I'm going to cut one in half just because I'm interested to see what they look like, and then I'm going to taste it. Ooh, that's got a good crunch sound. Yay. Okay, so now it's time for my favourite part, which is the taste test. Now they are still pretty hot, and I know you meant to let them cool down first, but we all know I'm super impatient, so I'm just going to try one now, and of course I will have another one later when they're cooled down. Oh no! Choked before I've even tried it. Right, okay. I think I might have got some icing sugar dust in my mouth. really hot.
Really?
But super lemony, which I love, and really nice and creamy. Yeah, I'm really pleased with the pastry more than anything because obviously, as I said, I was a little bit worried about making vegan rough puff pastry because it's quite complicated. I've never tried it vegan or otherwise, so I didn't really know what I was going for. But as you might have heard, the pastry had a really good crunch to it, and that is not really what you get from a short crust, so I'm really pleased. And it's got, yeah, I feel like that was a success. I would definitely eat these again.
Yeah, all good.
Nice. Hot, hot, hot.
I can see the steam coming up.
Oh my god.
Impatient kid.
Now, yeah, I imagine that these are probably a lot nicer cooled down because also you'll be able to really taste the lemon and everything more when it's actually cool. But yeah, pretty pleased with this, so a success. I'm really pleased because this was the bake for Dairy Week, and obviously that is like a vegan's worst nightmare. I was really worried because there are so many elements that I had to change and that weren't as they probably would have been in the original recipe, and so I had no idea whether it was actually going to go well at all. But I'm actually really pleased with these. Obviously they're a bit shallower, but that's nothing to do with the quality of the bake, that's just me being an idiot. So basically, really good. Yay! So that was my attempt at making the vegan lemon cheesecake tarts, and I'm so happy with how they turned out. There were quite a few times during the baking process that I thought I'd messed it up or that it was going to go terribly wrong, but when they came out of the oven it actually looked amazing, and I'm so happy because, as I said, this was a really tricky bake to veganize because there were so many elements that very much relied on them having dairy properties, and so veganizing it was really tricky, but I'm so glad that it went as well as it did. And of course the most important part is that they tasted really delicious. I obviously burnt my mouth slightly trying them as soon as they came out of the oven, which in hindsight wasn't the best idea, but now that I've tried them again, that they've cooled down, they are super tasty, really lemony, the pastry is really flaky, and I'm just so happy with how it went. I'm definitely going to be remaking the lemon curd to have on toast because how amazing, I now know how to make vegan lemon curd, and also the puff pastry I feel like is an amazing thing to have in my baking repertoire because I can use that in so many things, and I'm really glad that I actually forced myself to try it this week because it should be really great that I can use that now in the future. So all in all, I'm really happy with how Dairy Week went, and I'm super proud that I actually managed to successfully veganize the recipe because when I saw it on Bake Off I thought that I was doomed because I had no idea how I was going to manage it. So obviously if you're going to try out this bake, I would love to hear how it goes, but obviously it's kind of complicated, so I definitely won't judge you if you don't give it a try. However, I would love to hear your thoughts on this week's bake, whether you'd prefer to try the dairy version that they did on Bake Off or my veganized version. So thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time for 1920s week, which sounds so much more exciting than Dairy Week.